Hi there, I'm Dan Satchoff. You know, it's been said in years past that you never get a second chance, rather, for a first impression. But now with the internet and other technologies on the rise, it could be said, my next guest is going to make the argument, that you don't get a first chance for a first impression. I'm joined to discuss this by the managing director of a company called Reputation Advocate. Steve Wire is with us today. Steve, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Tell me a little bit about Reputation Advocate, if you would.
Well, we started in 2006. I didn't have a technology background. I'd previously been involved in investment banking and ended up in some litigation. In 2006, I had an executive secretary of a client of mine point my attention toward what was online, and I found all of the allegations, the litigation that had just begun, was all right there on the first pages of my search results. And that was really the first time I became aware that public record information is online. Of course, that was 6 years ago.
Sure.
So online right now is even more broad and pervasive.
Wow. So now you said since 2006, so the company goes back to 2006. Let me ask you, Steve, since that time, have you seen a lot of changes in the way the internet is used? You know, it seems as though negative content and online attacks are on the rise. Why is that?
Well, if you just go back 6 years ago and think about your own life, think about your family's life, how dependent were you on the internet? For many people, it was just driven by email. Of course, in the last 6 years, you don't find Little League softball teams sponsored quite so much. Yellow Page sales are on the decline. And what's on the rise is the internet. It's pervasive. We hold it in our hand. We've got it on our televisions now. It's everywhere.
Absolutely. And having an online presence is kind of replacing the business card now, if you will. I mean, your presence online now kind of dictates who you are.
It really does. We talk to people and we say there's the public you and there's the private you. And those lines get very blurred from time to time. You know, I'm old enough that I remember when you applied for a job, you had to give a potential employer permission to look at your information and pull a background check.
Sure.
Today, there's no permission needed. And before you ever walk into a job, before your kid headed toward college is ever considered as an applicant, searches are being done.
Wow. Well, you bring up an interesting point there. The whole concept of being attacked online by say, an unknown accuser, it seems wrong at its core. Shouldn't there be laws, or are there laws against this type of thing?
You know, that's an interesting question, and it's a question we get almost every day. If we look at the body of law that governs online content, the cornerstone is freedom of speech, the First Amendment. But aside from that, there are only two primary federal laws that govern everything that happens on the internet, and they were both passed in the 90s. So let's think back. Where was the internet in the 90s? It was before Facebook, it was before Twitter, it was before Pinterest, it was before LinkedIn.
Sure. So in essence, it's still the Wild West out there in the internet, if you will. Let me ask you this, Steve. Would you say that people are more aware of how online content is intersecting their lives than they were, say 2 years ago?
I think absolutely that's true. Part of it's because people are now having fun with things like Facebook and Twitter, but there's a broader awareness. One of the things that's easy to point to is city, county, state, and federal courthouses are getting rid of paper. So what that means to you and I is that court documents that have been sealed or put away in dusty file cabinets for years are being scanned and placed online. Information, things that happened 2 decades ago, are now showing up on the first page of people's search results.
That's fascinating. And let me ask you this: your company, Reputation Advocate, speaks a great deal about digital branding. What does that actually look like? Well,
you know, it's interesting because we've gotten to the point where I can say to anyone I meet, you already have a digital brand, whether you've participated in it or not. Because on the internet now, data aggregation sites are pulling public record information, and that information is being put on sites And so if you go out and you search, it used to be you only found white pages or yellow pages and things like that. There are data aggregation sites now that have your political affiliation, have your property values, have your community activities. Sunshine laws require that your contributions to nonprofits be made public. Court documents, divorce records, inheritance documents, adoption documents, they're all out there. And that's before we even start talking about the slander sites that you can attack people on anonymously.
And that's where Reputation Advocate comes in.
That's what we do for lots of folks. People will call us and they may have something that they're distressed about, but what we talk about is proactively building quality content that fairly represents who you are. If we talk to a college student, the question is, what do you want to do? And let's place content that positions you well with a future employer.
Wow, so, that's fantastic. That's really fascinating, and I want to thank you right now for joining us. That's been enlightening for me, and I think for a lot of people as well. Thanks so much to my guest Steve Wire today, Reputation Advocate, and I hope we get to talk again. That's really fascinating.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome.